What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's transfer tips for game week 32, and I'm going to start off by talking about Bruno Fernandes. Now, this is a game week where a lot of people are free hitting, so the transfers in and out are a little bit skewed. For example, I'm free hitting. I've transferred Fernandes out, but obviously I'll get him back for game week 33. Either way, a lot of people are now saying he's now must sell, because if you got him in 29, it's 4 matches, 4 blanks, and all he's done is drop in price. And to be fair, people expect a little bit more than that, as they should. Now, if you're not free hitting this week, Fernandes to an Arsenal midfielder looks like a pretty good transfer. Fernandes to Salah looks like a great transfer. Nottingham Forest at home, perfect captain material, double game week in 34, and every other single game week for Liverpool is a pretty good fixture. So if you do Fernandes to Salah, you're probably then keeping him right up until game week 38. And I know there's been a lot of doubters about him recently, but I suspect people might have changed their mind after he did really well against Leeds. So Salah looks great going forward. Any other player you're bringing in, I'd be careful about what the points look like for the long term. Obviously, if you're doing someone like Fernandes to a Crystal Palace midfielder this week, of course you're going to gain more points because Fernandes doesn't have a fixture. But from 33 to 38, Man United have got 2 double game weeks. This guy's absolutely nailed on for minutes and first choice penalty taker. You would expect him to outscore those kind of players. Now, you might turn around and say there's a huge price difference. Absolutely. And if you're going to use that money for another kind of better move, then that's fair enough. You should definitely think about doing that. For example, if you did Fernandes to Eze, and then that money allows you to upgrade one of your defenders to Trent Alexander-Arnold, that's probably a really good move. But if you kept Bruno this week, even if it meant you only had 10 players, and then from 33 onwards, you can still build the rest of the squad that you want, then you should probably, for the most part, ignore the fact that he's 9.5, unless you think he's going to continue to blank. And if you do, then you should absolutely still continue to sell him. Now, for me, I think the Nottingham Forest game was quite interesting. If you watch that, very surprising that he didn't get any returns in that game. I think he probably was the best player on the pitch. Him and Eriksen definitely top 2. And I think it's encouraging that Casemiro and Eriksen are both back now, because that allows Fernandes to push forward. It is worth noting that Sabitzer was actually in the first 11 for that Nottingham Forest game. He went off with an injury in the warm-up. That's why Eriksen came in. But as he builds up his fitness, he is going to play more and more. That is Man United's best midfield 3, Casemiro, Eriksen, Fernandes. And I would also take note of what happens in the Europa League. So if you're not free hitting, and Man United go out of the Europa League on Thursday, I think there's much more reason to keep hold of Fernandes. Not because I think his minutes go up, because he's going to play pretty much every game anyway, but it means that Eriksen's not going to have to play Europa League and Premier League, and there's less matches overall to play. Man United have still got a lot of fixtures, like with the 2 double game weeks, that's still games every 3 to 4 days, but not having Europa League and also possibly going out of the FA Cup will reduce the amount of fixtures they're going to have to play. So I think it just makes Fernandes better, because he's more likely to play in that advanced role. So I haven't lost complete faith, but I'm a lot less confident now than I was back in game week 29 when I bought him in for a hit. For my own team, I've got pretty much no intention to sell. If you're on a free hit in 32 and you already own Fernandes, ahead of a double in 34 and then pretty good fixtures afterwards, I just can't really see the use of using a transfer on him. Unless you're in that position where you get to game week 34, you've got 5 double game weeks and you really want to bring Salah in or something like that, then maybe Fernandes can go. But I think it has to be a last resort. I think using a transfer on him is not something I would go out of my way to do. But if you're not free hitting in 32, different conversation. Arsenal good, Salah great, maybe someone else, but only if you're going to make use of the money for another really good move like Trent, for example. So Ollie Watkins continues to be really popular, nearly 250,000 transfers in this week, absolutely helped by the 16-pointer against Newcastle. And what really impressed me about that match wasn't that Aston Villa won, because they've been in great form recently, much improved under Unai Emery, and a large part of that is down to Ollie Watkins and how well he's been doing, but it was how comfortable they were against a very good Newcastle side. 3-0 just didn't flatter them. And as someone that likes the old underlying numbers, I went back back and check some of my graphics from Game Week 28, which is when a lot of us brought Watkins in, his XG per 90 was 0.39. Now it's up to 0.44. So there's been some improvement there. And I actually tweeted about this yesterday. His XG per match over the last 8 games, very impressive. We've got 0.7 4 times, then 0.8, 0.5, 0.6, and 1. Now, if you're someone that doesn't like XG or you're just not bothered about it, that's fair enough. But I can tell you that those are kind of elite level numbers. And if you had an attacker in FPL that put up those kind of numbers for the whole season, you'd easily pay like Salah and Haaland prices for the pleasure. Now, whether or not Watkins can keep this up obviously remains to be seen. But I think when someone scores a bunch of goals and they're also putting up really good underlying numbers, that is an indicator that the goals are probably going to keep continuing. I'm not saying he's going to go and score another 6 in the next 6 matches or anything like that, but he's probably going to continue to tick over. And he has done that for the whole season. His goals per 90 are 0.5. So basically, he's scoring a goal every other game or every other time he plays 90 minutes. So overall looking great. Now, over the last few weeks, I've been saying the longer you leave it to bring in Aston Villa players, the worse they get. Because from Game Week 34, they've got Man United away, Wolves away, Spurs at home, Liverpool away. Doesn't look great on paper. And I think that point still stands for a defender. You could make a case to bring them in this week and just play them against Brentford, Fulham and Wolves, and that would probably be okay. But I'm actually coming around to the idea that Ollie Watkins is just a really good pick that you should probably look at buying if you need a new forward. Because although on paper, United, Spurs and Liverpool doesn't look great, and look, Man United have defended quite well for most of this season, but they're missing Martinez, they're missing Varane. Spurs and Liverpool are defences that can be gotten at. And if Villa keep putting up these kind of performances, they will cause those defences trouble. Now, I'm still not saying they are fixtures that I would look to target, but if you didn't want to buy Watkins and you need a new forward, then you've got to make a case that someone else is better. And I think for 7.7 million or below, that is quite difficult right now. Like, Tony is in a very similar price point, but he's still 1 yellow card away from suspension. We're still slightly worried about that ban. Isak is a potentially really good option. He's a little bit cheaper than Watkins and has a double game week still to come, probably in game week 36. And if you knew he was absolutely nailed to start every single game, you might say that he's as good, if not slightly better than Watkins because of that extra fixture. I still have slight doubts in my mind about him. I know he's only missed like 1 match over the last 5 or 6, but that could happen again. So I actually am looking to buy Isak at some point. But would I buy him ahead of Watkins right now? I'm not so sure. I think you just take the points from Brentford, Fulham, Man United and Wolves overall, and I'm not saying he definitely goes and gets a big haul against Man United, but it's also a double game week, so it might be a week where you want to bench him anyway and just play him in the other fixtures. So I think in the short term, you just take the points and then worry about it later. My general plan for Watkins is to hold him until game week 36, and if that is the week the Newcastle double, that's when I'll sell him to Isak. But if you're looking at other players around that price point, Solanke is pretty decent, a lot cheaper, but again, is he better than Watkins? Not so sure. So although I don't necessarily like the fixtures on paper, I don't think there's really much of an argument to be made against bringing him in this week. Again, if you're making transfers in, you're not free hitting anyway, and he's got a match this week, and he is going to be one of the top forwards. I think a lot of people that are free hitting are going to include him. So nothing really bad to say against him. 7.7 million, still a good price. Nail, good minutes, penalties. Everything to love about him right now. I love FPL sometimes. Elise gets 3 assists against Leeds and everyone brings him in. Then in the following game, Eze gets 2 goals against Southampton and all of a sudden he's the more popular midfield pick. So if you're going to go for one of the two this week, which one should you go for? Now, we've only had 3 games under Roy Hodgson so far. And to be fair, I think I did say after the Leicester or Leeds game, perhaps some of the uptick with Palace is just because they've got good fixtures. Because they had a pretty bad fixture run before that. But I've probably got to give Hodgson a little bit more credit than that because he's brought Eze back into the side and they've had a lot of shots in those 3 games, and even if it is just because of the good fixtures, that's what Crystal Palace have a lot of from now until the end of the season. So I do see the merit in looking at either Eze or Elise. Comparing the two, again, over a very small sample, it looks fairly clear that Elise is probably more likely to get you an assist and Eze slightly more skewed towards getting you a goal. And as we know in FPL, goals are worth more. So it's going to sound very knee-jerk, but if I was going to pick one of these 2 players, it probably would be Eze right now. That might change next week, but he probably looks slightly better because he's got a bit more goal threat. In terms of minutes, it hasn't been great for Eze over the last kind of 10 to 15 weeks. He wasn't used a huge amount by Vieira, but there's obviously a very clear distinction from when Vieira was in charge in the minutes and when Hodgson was in charge, and he's played 90 minutes every single game. Now, someone like Zaha, for example, got injured against Leicester, but I don't think that's going to have effect. He plays in a different position. So when Zaha is back, and that's probably going to be towards the end of this month, Eze is still going to get good minutes, and so is Elise as well. I mean, Elise's played and started pretty much every single game for a little while now, but he's also got 90 minutes every game under Hodgson. So minutes-wise, they look great. It's just these numbers over a very small sample that probably push me slightly towards Eze, but I don't think there's really a right or a wrong answer here. The only other thing that I would say is, yes, if you need a 5.5 million midfielder that has to play in 32 and have good fixtures after that, they probably are worth looking at. But if we move on one game week to game week 33, and you're not already filled up with 3 Brighton players, I would absolutely be going for one of Mitoma, McAllister or March instead, because their fixtures are also pretty good, but they also have 3 double game weeks. So it comes back to that conversation around taking up midfield spots. So again, if Rashford's fit, and a lot of you are bought in Grealish now, there's Salah, possibly Fernandes, March, Mitoma, McAllister. That's already 7 players, without even mentioning Kevin De Bruyne, before you get onto Crystal Palace one. So I think for their price, they're very good, but I still question whether or not they should be taking up a midfield spot in our teams. And if you're mostly playing a 3-4-3, and there's 3 forwards that you really like, Watkins, Haaland, plus one other, I find it even more difficult to fit them in. So I don't want to sound like I'm down on them, because I think that 5.5 million is a really great price for what they offer, but I just think there's lots of other midfielders and there's enough money to go around to get them. So they look good for 32, but from 33 onwards, I think there's at least 5 other midfielders that I would prefer to have instead. But you might have a different way of thinking, a different way you want to set up your team. That's absolutely fine. Eze and Elise, both good. I'd probably slightly lean towards Eze, probably a little bit knee-jerk. So I don't have a huge amount to say about Erling Haaland, other than if you're going to transfer him out this week, which is perfectly fine, he doesn't have a fixture, he cannot punish you, make sure you've got a plan to bring him back in sooner rather than later, and then you don't price yourself out from doing so, because, and I know the FPL community hate this word, but from double game week 34 onwards, I think Haaland is basically essential. And if you go without him, you are fighting a losing battle. Even if you've got a really big gap in overall rank or a mini league to kind of, close, I think you're giving too much of an advantage to those above you by going without him. He's just too good. And I know this sounds really obvious. Get the guy with 8.1 points per match into your team. But I also know from years of doing FPL content, people will be thinking about this. And what will happen is they'll go without him, because they've got a big gap to close. That gap will become bigger, and so therefore you've definitely got to go without Haaland, because there's now an even bigger reason to be differential, and the gap just widens. So it's too much of an advantage to everyone else. There has to be better ways to do things differently, perhaps captaincy. So you could captain Salah instead of Haaland in game week 34, for example. You could go with really different with some of your other picks. I just don't see the point in doing it with Haaland. You could argue that when, and it probably is when, not if, Man City get through the quarterfinals against Bayern Munich, there could be some rotation around the semi-finals, but they're also fighting for the Premier League, and we haven't seen any rotation yet for Haaland when he's fit. Yes, he comes off early sometimes, but only when the game is won. So we saw that against Leicester, 3-0 up at half-time, Haaland's already got 2 goals, bring him up, rest him for the next game, and that will probably continue to happen, but completely missing out, we haven't seen that yet. So you could gamble, that will start to happen, but I just think it's too much of a risk, and like I said, too much of an advantage to give up. Obviously, it's your team. Do what you want. If you want to go without Haaland, absolutely fair enough. If you don't care what the rank is, if it goes wrong, then that is what you should do. But for most people, just make sure you've got a plan to bring him back. The only other thing to talk about is whether you get him back in 33 or 34. I think in 33 you could captain someone else, maybe Salah against West Ham away or something like that, maybe Kane against Man United at home, but most people are going to still captain Haaland against Arsenal. And let's not forget, this is a team that has defended very well this season, but they've also just shipped 2 goals to Liverpool, should have been more, and 2 goals to West Ham. Man City are absolutely capable of doing 2 goals or probably even more, so I would want Haaland for that game, but at the minimum you've got to have him back for 34. So 125,000 people already transferred him out. No panic this week, but the panic definitely begins next week because that is a massive ownership to climb against. So let me know, or fight against, I should say. Let me know down in the comments below. Are you going to go without Haaland at any point for the rest of this season? Do you think he's going to get rotated around the Champions League semi-finals? Leave me a comment below. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And I'll catch you tomorrow for the Game Week preview.